The Covenant is a movie that explores the relationship between American soldiers in Afghanistan and their Afghani interpreters. Directed and produced by Guy Ritchie and starring Jake Gyllenhaal and Salim, The Covenant does a pretty decent job of telling a long, involved story in just 2 hours. But could it have been so much better than it was? Hi guys, my name is Pete. I'm an actor and a filmmaker, and naturally, I love movies. It hasn't occurred to me to talk about movies on YouTube until just now, and it's something I want to try, something I want to explore because it's something that I'm passionate about. I'm going to start out with a movie that has been out for a couple of weeks now, but I haven't seen until just the other day. I'm going to try to review at least one movie a week, so if you like this one, smash that like button, hit subscribe for more movie reviews, and hey, give me your thoughts about the movies as they come out, and what you think about my reviews. So, The Covenant starts out pretty well. Jake Gyllenhaal plays Army Sergeant John Kinley, who's leading a squadron of guys looking for Taliban munition factories and stores, and his interpreter is this guy Ahmed, who is perfectly and beautifully played by Salim. Now, it's not a true story or even based on a true story, but it is based on the obviously very real events of what happened in Afghanistan. Despite the fact that some of the early dialogue is kind of on the nose, there's this scene where Kinley is looking for arms and munitions in this opium den, and he literally sits down and goes, "I'm so sick of all this bullshit." To me, that was a little cringy because the number one rule of filmmaking is show, don't tell. There are dozens of other ways that Ritchie could have used to show us that Kinley was disenfranchised or disenchanted with his job or the way that he was being forced to do his job, rather than him actually having to sit down and say it to himself or to the camera or to nobody in particular. This happens a few more times in Act 1, but overall, the first act is great. There's a really good balance between character introduction and plot development, and I thought to myself, this could be a really interesting character-driven story about the harsh realities of the war in Afghanistan with a focus on the unsung heroes that were the Afghan interpreters. But I also felt like in Act 1, Ritchie could have established a stronger relationship between Kinley and Ahmed, which would have kind of justified a lot of what happens in the rest of the movie. Ahmed does a great job of showing himself loyal, intuitive, and fearless, while Kinley is mostly dismissive and condescending, and there just isn't really any chemistry with them early on. Then, at the end of Act 1, there's a turning point, which I won't spoil, but the long and short of it is that Ahmed ends up having to drag Kinley more than 60 miles across rugged Afghan terrain while being pursued by the Taliban, who are hunting both of them. And this is where I started thinking to myself, this part could have been a whole movie in itself. In fact, this entire movie could have been a full season of a TV show, if not 2 or 3. But since time is limited, we mostly get to watch Act 2 through montages and melodramatic sequences to kind of move the plot along without really getting a good gritty look at the reality of Ahmed's heroism. And I get it in some ways. You're trying to tell a complex long story in 2 hours, but it did feel a little bit rushed. Then, by the time we get into Act 3, we jump into what feels like a whole new movie. Kinley is back in America, and Ahmed is somewhere hiding in Afghanistan where no one can find him. So Kinley decides, in an act of true Hollywood heroism, to go back to Afghanistan to try to rescue him. This is where Kinley devolves into kind of a caricature, yelling and threatening people on the phone, and instead of the quieter, brooding soldier that he was in Acts 1 and 2, turns into more of a Rambo-type character, ready to risk everything to go get this guy. And it's heartwarming in some ways. He feels like he owes a debt of gratitude to Ahmed, but the tone change in his character doesn't feel entirely real or believable. The rest of the movie oscillates between some really good suspense and some fairly realistic attempts of him trying to sneak in on his own to Afghanistan to find this guy, and at times there's a little too much bravado, with kind of a Mission Impossible approach to problem solving. Blow it up, shoot it out, and do whatever it takes to get the job done. It's not terrible, it just feels like it misses the point at times. This could have been a thoughtful, nuanced movie that takes you through the complexities of a war that involves so many complex parties, from the American military to the Taliban and everyone caught in between with different loyalties and points of view and reasons why they did what they did. Instead, it kind of becomes a story about the American trying to save his friend who he owes a debt to, which actually I have no problem with that part of the story. That was very human and relatable. It was more the way that he ended up going about it that felt more like a Hollywood action film instead of a real human story. All that said, it's still pretty good and it does make you think. It highlights the promises that America made to the thousands of Afghan interpreters to help them get visas to the US once the conflict was over, promises that weren't always kept, and the movie does a pretty good job of highlighting that. The acting is very strong. Gyllenhaal's acting is good, not great. Like, he was mostly believable, but he never made me feel anything, if that makes sense. Good acting is generally believable. Great acting makes you feel something, some kind of emotion. In my opinion, Salim steals the show. He's the underdog who's an outsider both in his own country with his own people because he doesn't fit in with the Taliban. He also doesn't really fit in with the US Army. And so you end up really wanting to root for this guy. Part of that is the character himself, but Salim plays him with such vulnerable nuance and strength that you can't help but root for him from the very beginning. The score is good, it's a little over the top at times, but that kind of goes with the whole tone of the movie. The movie never lags or gets boring, and it's pretty riveting throughout. If you like action films, you'll love this one. There's lots of it. Plenty of near misses and close calls and suspense to keep you on the edge of your seat. And it's never just action for the sake of action. All the action keeps you invested because you want both of the main characters to succeed in their objectives. This movie feels like a departure from his usual style for Guy Ritchie. His movies are mostly dark, gritty, sort of character-driven dramas, and he tries to mix that in here at times, but especially in Act 3, he went full Hollywood. The themes of this movie are sacrifice, heroism, and keeping promises, which gives it its name, The Covenant. It's a good attempt at highlighting the untold story of the Afghan interpreters, and I think mostly it does that pretty well. The ending will definitely get to you, and like most good movies, it does hit you deep in your gut, and I think that's, for me, the mark of a good movie, if it really makes you feel something. Like I said, I would have loved this story, though, to be told through the medium of a TV show, because I think it's such a complex, fascinating storyline. It deserves a longer form style to really get into it, and there's enough material there to be gripping for at least a season or two, or maybe a limited miniseries. But overall, look, the things that I've been critical about with this movie, some of them are just problems that come with a limited storytelling format, and there's not much anyone could have really done about that. This is honestly a great movie that I would definitely recommend going to see in theaters if you can. I know it's not in every theater anymore. If you can get it at home, especially if you have a big screen TV and a good surround sound system, it's well worth it. But if it's still in theaters in your area, I would go see it in theaters because that's the only way to really feel the full force of this movie, especially with all the action sequences. I'm going to give this movie a 7 out of 10 because I think it's good, but it could also have been so much better. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed my take on The Covenant, hit like, hit subscribe. We're going to have another movie out next week. Leave me a thought in the comments. How did you feel about The Covenant? How did you feel about my review? And hey, if there's a movie you want me to review, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great week. I'll see you next time.